Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into what has to be one of the greatest, grittiest survival stories ever told. This is the tale of the 10,000, a mercenary army that marched to the very heart of an enemy empire and then had to fight its way back out again.
So let's just put ourselves in their shoes for a second. It's 401 BC. The massive Peloponnesian War just wrapped up, which means guys like you, battle-hardened professional soldiers, are out of a job. A rich Persian prince hires you for a seemingly easy contract. You march, you fight, you win a huge battle, but then, right in that moment of victory, you find out your employer, the guy who signs the checks, is dead. Your contract? Gone. You're deep, deep inside enemy territory, you're surrounded, and the king, whose brother you just tried to overthrow, well, he wants you dead. This was the terrifying new reality for an elite force of Greek mercenaries that history now calls the 10,000.
You see, this whole thing kicks off not as a story of survival, but one of pure, raw ambition. It's basically a massive family feud, and at the center of it is this incredibly charismatic, but also incredibly ruthless Persian prince named Cyrus the Younger.
Cyrus knew that if he was going to pull off what he was planning, he needed the absolute best army money could buy. And in the ancient world, that meant one thing: Greeks. Specifically, hoplites. These are your heavy infantry, covered in bronze, carrying the big round shield and the long spear. They fought in a formation called the phalanx, which was basically a walking wall of death that had proven just about unstoppable. So Cyrus gathers about 10,000 of these guys, tough, experienced veterans, and tells them they're just going on a little expedition.
And you have to appreciate the sheer audacity of the lie he told them. The official story was that they were just marching to punish some rebellious local governor over in Pisidia. You know, a quick, well-paying job, in and out. But the real mission? Oh, it was something else entirely. The real plan was to march all the way to Babylon, find his own brother, King Artaxerxes II, kill him, and seize the throne of the largest empire on the face of the earth.
So the army gets together at Sardis and starts marching east. But pretty quickly, guys start looking at their maps. The Greeks, you see, were pretty good geographers. And they start noticing that every single day, they're marching further and further away from Pisidia. The whispers start. The suspicion grows with every mile, until finally they get to the great Euphrates River. And at that point, the lie just becomes too big to hide. Cyrus finally comes clean. He pulls the generals aside and tells them the real plan. We're here to overthrow the king. The Greeks were absolutely furious. I mean, they felt totally betrayed, but they were also 1,000 miles from home with no good way to get back. Cyrus, being a master manipulator, dangles an insane pay raise in front of them, a fortune beyond their wildest dreams. So, caught between a rock and a hard place, and let's be honest, tempted by all that gold, they agree. They cross the river. They march on Babylon. So what happens next? Out on a dusty plain called Cunaxa is this perfect storm of military brilliance and just pure, reckless stupidity. And it all goes down in a single, chaotic afternoon that will seal their fate.
On their side of the battlefield, the Greeks were just terrifyingly good at their job. As hoplites, they advanced as one solid unit, this walking wall of bronze and iron. They started singing the paean, their battle hymn, and then they charged. The Persian troops across from them, who had probably never seen anything like this disciplined ferocity, just broke and ran. For the Greeks, the battle was over in minutes. It was a complete, textbook victory.
But here's the thing about war. It's not just about winning your little piece of the map. While the Greeks are busy chasing off their opponents, Cyrus spots his brother, Artaxerxes, across the battlefield, and in a moment of pure personal hatred, he just throws all strategy out the window. He leads this reckless, desperate charge straight at the king's personal bodyguard, and he gets cut down and killed. And just like that, in an instant, the entire reason for the war, their contracts, their promised fortunes, it all just vanished in a cloud of dust.
I mean, really think about the whiplash of that moment. They had absolutely won their battle, but they had decisively lost the war. They were now an army without a country, without an employer, and without a purpose. And they were stranded over 1,500 miles from the coast of Greece, with the guy who just won the war, the very angry Persian king, bearing down on them.
So the Persian king, Artaxerxes, sends them an offer. Lay down your arms, surrender, and maybe I'll show you mercy. But the 10,000? They had a different answer. No surrender. They were going to march home.
Well, the Persians tried a little treachery first. They invited the Greek generals to a meeting to discuss safe passage. Of course, it was a trap. The generals were grabbed and executed. The Persians probably thought that would be it, that the army would just collapse into chaos. But instead, something incredible happened. The regular soldiers held a democratic election right there on the battlefield. They voted for new leaders from their own ranks, including a sharp Athenian guy named Xenophon, who would not only help lead them, but would also write down this entire incredible story.
Their march north turned into this brutal, bloody gauntlet. They fought their way through Mesopotamia and then up into the freezing, jagged mountains of what we now call Kurdistan. They were constantly harassed by Persian cavalry and then ambushed relentlessly by fierce mountain tribes like the Carduchians, who were absolute masters of guerrilla warfare. These guys would just rain down arrows and boulders on them from the cliffs above day after day. And yet, as Xenophon would later write, their most relentless enemies weren't other people at all, it was the elements. Starvation was their constant companion. But the winter was something else. They had to march through deep, impassable snow in the Armenian highlands. Men were suffering from horrible frostbite, from utter exhaustion, from snow blindness. This wasn't a battle of spears anymore. This was a daily fight just to stay alive against nature itself.
So how on earth did they survive all this? Just pure grit and incredible ingenuity. They figured out how to wrap their feet in animal hides to make crude snowshoes. They reorganized their marching formation into a moving, hollow square to protect the few supplies and wounded they had left. They would capture locals and force them to be guides through the treacherous mountain passes, and they raided villages for any scrap of food they could find.
So after months and months of this soul-crushing struggle, facing death in the snow every single day, the absolutely exhausted front of the army struggles up over one final, windswept mountain pass.
And then, a sound starts up at the front. At first, it's just a few guys shouting, but the sound gets louder and it starts to ripple back through the long, weary column of soldiers. It grows into this deafening roar as thousands of voices join in. The men in the back, they start running forward. They're thinking it's another ambush, but then they crest the hill and they see it too. The Black Sea. Thalata, Thalata. The sea, the sea. You have to understand, to a Greek, the sea was everything. It was life, it was trade, it was civilization, it was the highway back home. After all those months lost in a hostile, landlocked world, seeing that water was like seeing salvation. Xenophon says men were just openly weeping, hugging each other. That sight was the symbol that their impossible journey was almost over. It was the moment they knew they had made it.
All told, from their starting point in Sardis to the heart of the Persian Empire at Canoxa, and then all the way back through those mountains to the coast, their journey was an unbelievable 3,465 miles. Almost all of it on foot, through deserts, mountains, and lands where everyone wanted them dead.
And here's what might be the most astonishing part of the whole story. Despite the battles, the betrayals, the starvation, the brutal, brutal cold, the vast majority of the army made it out. About 8,600 of the original 10,000 reached the sea. It is one of the most incredible testaments to leadership, to discipline, and just to sheer human resilience in all of military history.
So why does this story still matter? What's the big takeaway? Because their epic march did way more than just save an army. It sent a shockwave through the entire Greek world. For the very first time, it proved that a small, disciplined army from Europe could march into the heart of the so-called mighty Persian Empire and walk right back out again. It basically exposed the empire as a paper tiger, and in doing that, it planted a seed, an idea in the minds of future Greek leaders. An idea that would fully blossom less than 70 years later with the conquests of a guy named Alexander the Great. The March of the 10,000 wasn't just an escape, it was a roadmap.